Welcome to a short architectural tour of two extraordinary buildings in northwest Surrey. Both were the result of the collaboration between two 19th century men. The first is the Holloway Sanatorium, now residential and known as Virginia Park. The second is Royal Holloway College, now known as Founders Building, Royal Holloway, University of London. The inspiration for both was the phenomenally wealthy entrepreneur and publicist Thomas Holloway, and the designer for both was the little-known architect William Henry Crossland. My name is Sheila Binns, and I'm the author of the first biography of the architect of these two stunning buildings. The two men met when Crossland won an architectural competition in 1872 to design a sanatorium for Thomas Holloway. Crossland managed to meet Holloway before the competition took place, so formed a clear idea of what the patron wanted. Holloway had a definite scheme for his sanatorium. He wanted it modelled on a building he knew well, the Cloth Hall at Ypres in Belgium, and to be provided with the most up-to-date facilities. As the project developed, Crossland and Holloway worked closely together. What you see in these images is an outstanding restoration of the original building. Holloway's ideas originally included no decoration, as he felt it wouldn't be conducive to patients' recovery. But at some point he changed his mind, and the result is what you see here. An extraordinarily rich and bizarre combination of naturalistic motifs and grotesques, with the inclusion of Holloway's own initials and those of his wife. Up to designing this sanatorium, Crossland had designed many fairly modest buildings, mostly in or near his hometown, Huddersfield in West Yorkshire, and one large, truly outstanding building. This was the Town Hall for Rochdale in Lancashire, and he modelled the interior of this sanatorium on that of Rochdale Town Hall. As at Rochdale, from the entrance hall, the stairs to the first floor rise ahead of the visitor and divide into a double staircase to reach the Great Hall. Holloway planned this hall to serve as recreation space. As at Rochdale, every surface is decorated. Holloway commissioned life-size portraits of people who, in his view, had made Britain great. He included, of course, himself and his wife Jane. Also included were portraits of his brother-in-law, George Martin Holloway, who latterly supervised construction here and at the college, and H Crossland, the architect. Architecturally, the most striking aspect of this great hall is its remarkable hammer beam roof. This method of roof construction was something of a Crossland trademark. The one you see here is very similar to that at Rochdale, but he also designed them into several of his smaller buildings. As you can see, the height of the hall is maximised by this graceful style, and it offers plenty of surfaces for decoration. Thomas Holloway was an exacting patron. He was prepared to spend a very great deal of money, but he made sure it was spent wisely. He visited the sanatorium building site almost daily to check progress. On one occasion, according to Crossland, he found workmen cutting bricks to make mouldings. In discussion with Crossland, he learned that stone would be a cheaper option, so the decorative design and process had to be changed, whilst not slackening the pace of the main construction work. As well as the main sanatorium building, Crossland designed a chapel, the landscaping, several lodges and cottages, and smaller features, including gates. Remarkably, in 1873, when work had barely begun on the sanatorium, Thomas Holloway had an idea for a second institution, a convalescent home for incurables. He formed a good relationship with his architect and discussed this idea with Crossland, who gave Holloway several design suggestions. Architectural taste was changing, and wealthy self-made men like Holloway were increasingly favouring the sort of Renaissance architecture found in the chateaux of the Loire Valley in France. So Crossland presented Holloway with pictures of several of these chateaux, putting a picture of the Chateau of Chambord on the top. Holloway was impressed and asked Crossland what he would do if he were to win a competition for the second institution. Crossland's reply was that as soon as he could make sure work was properly supervised at the sanatorium, he would go to the Loire Valley and sketch and measure up This plainly impressed Holloway too, as he immediately offered the very considerable task of designing his second building to Crossland, saying he'd had enough of competitions. Crossland and an assistant departed for France within a few weeks, and Holloway himself joined them soon afterwards, working alongside Crossland, clarifying details and working out the various points that were a concern to them. They decided there in the Loire Valley that the second institution should be based on the chateau at Chambord. At some point after designing had begun, Holloway changed his mind, probably encouraged by his wife Jane, as to the nature of the second institution, and decided that it should be a college for the higher education of women. He was adamant, despite the advice of eminent academics, that it should be a college, not a school or a teacher training institution, and that ultimately it should offer degrees. It's difficult for us today to realise how radical this was. Women's higher education was in its infancy, with small numbers at a very small number of institutions. Thomas Holloway was planning on a grand scale, and Crossland was designing on a grand scale. A college for 250 that he wanted to be unique in the world. Crossland's designs were changed many times, with the result that the final building looked very much less like the Chateau of Chambord than originally intended. Its plan is simple, 2 quadrangles with a central spine. The terrain that Crossland had to work with was a steeply sloping hill, a problem that was overcome by an extra story at the southern end. A notable design absence is the famous double staircase from Chambord. Instead, Crossland's staircases fitted the footprint of a single room, permitting broad vistas along the exceptionally wide corridors. At a time when student accommodation was normally up staircases directly from quadrangles, this style of accommodation was innovatory and doubtless much safer for a female community. Thomas Holloway wanted the best in everything, and Crossland recognised that it was his great good fortune to be able to work in a way that most architects enjoyed only in their dreams. With virtually unlimited resources, the quality of the building was exceptionally high, with many design features that added to the expense of the project. There is, for example, a great deal of decoration. There are bullseye windows and windows with curved glass in the corner pavilions, all costing very considerably more than basic equivalents. In particular, though, the whole building is constructed using tuck pointing, an expensive method of mortaring that gives the illusion of a very thin line of mortar. Another expensive expedient the two men put in place was siting the boiler house away from the main building, where its tall chimneys would carry the smoke away from the college. Services were brought to the college through an underground tunnel. The excavations of the tunnel and of the foundations of the college itself levelled the hill at the northern end, creating a flat sports field. Crossland worked well with his wealthy patron and learned business skills from Holloway, although there was some friction at an early stage regarding payments. Crossland was prepared to do Holloway's bidding, changing direction on many occasions. Equally though, Holloway was happy to accept Crossland's advice, on one occasion apparently assuring others that Crossland could do anything. Their opinions sometimes differed though, for instance on the method of accessing the ground below the terrace at the southern end, which is where we are now. Crossland felt central steps were more appropriate, in the middle over there. Holloway wanted steps at the corners, doubtless a more expensive expedient, but Holloway prevailed, of course. The chapel, non-denominational at Holloway's insistence, was the heart of the college. Crossland was particularly pleased with the antiqued effect of the decoration on the ceiling of the chapel, likening it to the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. Probably the last consultation between the two men, when the elderly Holloway's health was failing, was on the style of the lodge at the main gate, which remains in place to this day. Holloway died before the two extraordinary buildings were opened, although he saw both essentially complete. He seldom praised anyone, but made it very clear that he was well pleased with his architect. The sanatorium opened in 1885 and the college in 1886. They made Crossland famous, and for a few years he enjoyed celebrity status. At a time when architects experimented with classical, Gothic and other architectural styles, it was generally recognised that in the design of the college, Crossland came as near as any architect to creating a truly Victorian style. Patron and architect would surely be pleased to know that their sanatorium and college, that cost them both so much in time and effort, are still cherished, both now Grade 1 listed buildings.